Missouri hides more than it reveals. Beneath its farmland and forests are ancient secrets, giant bones, lost tribes, vanished mines, and stone symbols no one can decode. This isn't folklore. It's the eerie half-buried truth beneath the show. Step off the map and into the forgotten past of Missouri's strangest mysteries. The lost mines of the Ozarks. Hidden deep in the rugged hills and winding hollows of the Ozark Mountains, there's a mystery that has refused to die. For generations, people have whispered stories about ancient mines buried in the backcountry. Silver, lead, and maybe even gold hidden away in the rocks, forgotten or abandoned long ago. Now, these aren't just stories about old-time prospectors chasing a dream. The legends go back even further. Some say Native Americans knew about these deposits long before Europeans ever showed up. Others believe Spanish explorers came through in the 1600s or 1700s and worked the mines in secret. And then there are the really old claims that the mines were already ancient by the time the Spanish arrived. No matter the version, the idea is the same. The Ozarks may be sitting on more than just limestone and caves. There might be a lost chapter of mining history buried right under our feet. One of the most talked about stories centers on supposed Spanish expeditions into the region. While it's well known that Spanish explorers were active in places like New Mexico, Texas, and Florida, some accounts, mostly from fringe historians or local lore, suggest that small Spanish groups made their way into Arkansas and southern Missouri in search of silver. According to these tales, they actually found what they were looking for, veins of or hidden in the Ozark Plateau. The stories go on to say that the Spanish set up secret mining camps guarded by small bands of soldiers. They mined quietly, avoiding attention, but over time, things went wrong. Maybe native resistance pushed them out. Maybe internal conflicts tore them apart. In any case, they supposedly abandoned the mines, and some versions say they sealed the entrances before disappearing into history. Now, is there any hard proof of this? Not really. But that hasn't stopped people from looking across parts of Missouri. Folks have reported finding what they believe to be Spanish smelters, old tools, even carved crosses in the woods. Some claim to have seen rock piles or stone markers shaped like arrows or symbols believed to be Spanish trail signs, pointing towards something hidden. Whether these are real markers or just wishful thinking is tough to say, but the fact that people keep finding and sharing these signs says something about how powerful these stories are. One of the more well-known legends ties directly to the name Silver Dollar City, and no, we're not talking about the amusement park rides. The legend says that early settlers in the area heard native stories about a silver mine somewhere nearby. Some claimed they even stumbled into old tunnels lined with wooden timbers complete with pick marks in the stone. Whether those were old mines or just natural caves is still up for debate. In Christian and Stone counties, the stories take on a darker twist. There are old rumors about people who claim to find one of these mines only to vanish without a trace. Others reportedly tried to dig on their own only to be stopped by suspicious landowners, government agencies, or just plain bad luck. During the 20th century, a handful of researchers said they had maps, copies of old Spanish charts passed down through generations that pointed to the lost mine sites. But none of these maps ever produced any concrete results. If the mines are real, they're still hiding. There's also the mystery of the Osage Nation. The Osage had lived throughout much of what's now Missouri, and some early European accounts mention that they possessed silver ornaments. Yet, there were no known silver mines on the surface, and no open pits have ever been discovered. So, where did the silver come from? The most likely answer is trade. Silver passed down through networks that stretched from Mexico all the way to the Great Lakes, but that hasn't stopped people from wondering if the Ozark knew something that we've since forgotten. Then there's the question of geology. Is there even enough silver in the Ozarks to justify all these stories? While Missouri is rich in lead and zinc, it's actually one of the leading lead producers in the country. The towns of Posey and Joe Plain were booming mining hubs back in the day. Silver, on the other hand, is much rarer in this region, but small amounts of silver can sometimes be found mixed in with galena, or that's the same stuff mined in Missouri for centuries. So technically, it's not impossible. A lucky strike could have been enough to spark the original tales. Or maybe, just maybe, the mines were more valuable for the legends they created than for what they actually held. That's where the treasure hunters come in. Even today, people are still out there looking. Some use metal detectors, others try dowsing rods or even ground-penetrating radar. A few focus on deciphering old family maps or tracking down long-forgotten journal entries. Every few years, someone pops up claiming they found something. A sealed shaft, a collapsed tunnel, strange carvings on a boulder, but they rarely share exact locations. Whether that's because they're protecting a secret or just keeping the legend alive is anyone's guess. The Ozarks are the perfect place for this kind of mystery. The terrain is wild and unpredictable. Thick forests, deep valleys, endless ridges. It's not hard to imagine how something or someone could disappear without a trace. Caves snake underground for miles. Rivers twist through remote hollows. If you wanted to hide a mine hundreds of years ago, this would have been the spot to do it. So, are the lost mines real, or is this all just folklore? A patchwork of rumors, old stories, and a little bit of wishful thinking. The truth is probably somewhere in between. There were definitely early miners in the Ozarks working small veins of lead and other metals, and there's always a chance that one or two of those old sites never got rediscovered. Maybe a lucky hunter or hiker will stumble across one someday. But even if no one ever finds a single bar of silver, the legend still matters. It's not just about treasure, it's about curiosity. The kind that drives people to keep searching, keep wondering, and keep exploring. That feeling that just over the next ridge, hidden beneath the moss and leaves, there's something amazing waiting to be uncovered. In the Ozarks, mystery isn't just part of the landscape, it is the landscape. The giant bones of Gasconade County, tucked into the hills of central Missouri, where the Gasconade River curls through wooded valleys and quiet farmland, there's a legend that refuses to die. It's not carved in stone or taught in history books, but if you've spent any time in these parts, you've probably heard whispers about it. A tale of giants, literal ones. Back in the 1800s, as settlers pushed deeper into the frontier and began clearing land for farming, they started unearthing strange things from the soil. Gasconade County became one of several places across the U.S. where people claimed to find giant human skeletons, not just tall folks, but towering figures said to measure between 7 and 9 feet tall. Most of these stories surfaced during the mid to late 19th century, when development and agriculture were unearthing things that had been buried for centuries. At first, the bones were often mistaken for those of large animals, but then someone would notice a jawbone, unmistakably human, but much too big, or a skull large enough that, as some accounts claimed, a grown man could place his own head entirely inside it. Newspapers at the time picked up on these discoveries, reporting skeletons with oversized skulls, massive rib cages, and unusually long arms and legs. In one detailed story, several of these large skeletons were reportedly found buried in a seated position along the Gasconade River as if laid to rest in some kind of ceremonial pose. One account even mentioned double rows of teeth, a detail that pops up in other giant skeleton reports around the country. But as you might expect, the bones never stayed put for long. Some were taken by curiosity seekers. Others were sent off to museums or private collectors and never seen again. And many were simply forgotten, reburied, washed away, or destroyed by time. That's part of the mystery. We have these vivid stories and scattered reports, but not much physical evidence. Some researchers believe many of these bones ended up at institutions like the Smithsonian, which was actively collecting Native American remains and artifacts during that era. But there's little trace of Missouri's giants in any official records. Over time, that silence helped feed suspicions. Were these remains quietly hidden away, or were they never real to begin with? Skeptics point out that the 19th century was full of sensational newspaper stories and amateur digs. Scientific standards weren't exactly what they are today. And it's true that a lot of so-called giant skeletons may have simply been misidentified animal bones or the exaggerated product of someone's tall tale. Early excavations were rarely led by trained archaeologists, and the line between fact and folklore was often pretty thin. Still, the number of reports is hard to ignore. Gasconade County isn't the only place these stories surfaced. Across the Midwest, from Ohio to Iowa to Tennessee, you'll find similar claims of oversized skeletons unearthed from mounds or remote grave sites. The consistency of the details, oversized skulls, seated burials, ceremonial arrangements makes you wonder if there's something behind it all. The burial mounds themselves add to the mystery. Many of the skeletons were found in or near mounds believed to be built by the Adena or Hopewell cultures, ancient native societies known for their earthworks, complex rituals, and long-distance trade networks. These cultures existed centuries before the Osage moved into Missouri, and their mound traditions spanned much of what's now the eastern United States. While mainstream archaeology hasn't confirmed the existence of giants, some of the larger bones described in old reports do challenge expectations. Could they have been examples of gigantism, a rare condition that causes people to grow unusually tall? Maybe that might explain one or two cases, but not entire groups. And these weren't just tall people, they were described as physically massive, well beyond normal human proportions. That's where the theories start to branch out. Some people believe these skeletons belong to a now extinct race of unusually large humans, an unknown chapter of North American history. Others go even further, linking the stories to biblical tales of the Nephilim, giant beings said to walk the earth before the Great Flood. Then there are the fringe ideas, lost civilizations, ancient alien hybrids, even early visitors from the Old World, Vikings, Phoenicians, take your pick. Most of these claims have little to no hard evidence behind them. But that doesn't stop people from wondering, because when you dig into the reports, not just the Missouri ones, but others from Kentucky, West Virginia, and Wisconsin, they start to echo each other in uncanny ways. Similar skeletons, similar burial sites, similar mysteries. Of course, science reminds us to be cautious. Human memory is fallible. Old newspaper stories were often more interested in selling copies than telling the full truth. And even today, there's a tendency to romanticize the unexplained. But in Gascon County, the stories haven't completely faded. Locals still talk about the giants, about bones dug up by their great-grandparents, or the mound that used to sit on a certain ridge before the fields were flattened. There are maps passed down in families, rumors of hidden burial sites on private land, and the occasional amateur explorer who still goes poking around in the woods, hoping to find something. That proves the old tale's right. Drive through the region today, and it feels like any other quiet stretch of rural Missouri. You've got rolling farmland, oak-covered hills, old barns, and limestone bluffs. Nothing shouts mystery at first glance, but if you know what you're looking for or what you're listening for, it's easy to feel the weight of forgotten stories in the air. And maybe that's what makes the legend of the Gasconade giants so compelling. Whether they were real or imagined, they speak to something deeper in us, a need to believe that the past still holds secrets, that not everything has been explained or uncovered, that there are still strange truths waiting in the soil just below the surface. So maybe the bones are gone. Maybe they were never there to begin with, but the story remains. It's passed down in family lore, buried in dusty archives, and etched into the identity of the land itself. The idea that once upon a time something truly enormous walked these hills and left behind just enough clues to keep us wondering. The stone fort at Elephant Rocks. If you ever find yourself in Iron County, Missouri, just a few miles outside the quiet town of Pilot Knob, you might stumble upon one of the strangest and least understood places in the state, Elephant Rocks State Park. Most people come for the obvious, giant rounded boulders of pink granite that look like a herd of stone elephants frozen in time. It's a peaceful, scenic place where families hike, kids climb, and photographers try to catch the perfect golden hour shot. But if you wander off the main trail, climb just a little higher, and know what you're looking for, you'll find something very different. A structure that doesn't quite belong. Locals have called it the Stone Fort for generations. And the truth is, no one really knows who built it or why. At first glance, it's easy to miss. Nature has done a good job of hiding it. Trees, brush, and lichen-covered rocks make the place look like just another patch of the ridge. But if you pause and look closer, odd things start to stand out. Giant slabs of granite don't just sit randomly on the hilltop. Some are arranged into walls, others are stacked with purpose. It's not obvious like a medieval castle or a Civil War fort, but it feels intentional. There are no signs explaining it, no brochures at the visitor center with its history. You won't see a plaque telling you when it was built, and that's where the mystery begins. The rocks themselves are ancient, over 1 billion years old, part of the St. Francois Mountains, which are among the oldest exposed rock formations in North America. Long before Missouri was even an idea, before the first native tribes came through the region, these hills were already standing. Some believe that's part of why the place holds power. There's something about the energy of the granite, the magnetic feel of the land that makes people stop and wonder. Local legends have tried to fill in the gaps. Old-timers say the stone fort was a sacred place, maybe used for ceremonies or ancient gatherings. Some believe it was defensive, a kind of primitive stronghold for people who lived here long before modern history began. There are stories that link it to the Mississippian culture, or maybe something even older. But the truth is, no one has proven anything, and that's not from lack of interest. It's from lack of study. Back in the early 20th century, some surveyors took note of the stone layout and marked it down as man-made, but after that, the trail goes cold. No official excavation, no archaeological teams digging through the soil, just a few old notes and a lot of unanswered questions. What's especially strange is how deliberate the layout feels. The stones aren't just big, they're massive. Some are too heavy for a single person to move, even with tools. Yet, they've been placed in ways that suggest human hands were involved. Dry-laid granite walls appear in short segments, like the ruins of some forgotten boundary. There are flat platforms that feel like lookout points. And in a few areas, the stones create enclosures that don't quite make sense unless someone built them for a reason. Could it have been a kind of calendar? Some researchers who visited the site think so. There are lines of sight from certain points that might align with solstices or lunar events. Nothing has been confirmed, but it's a theory that fits with similar ancient sites across the world, places where early people tracked time through shadows and sunlight. Then there's the location. The stone fort sits just a few miles from Sac Mountain, the highest point in Missouri. That area has always had strategic value. From native settlements to Civil War battles like the one fought nearby at Fort Davidson. It's possible the ridge was chosen for a reason, not just for its view, but for its meaning. And don't forget the quarrying. Elephant Rocks wasn't always a park. It was once an active granite quarry. And some skeptics say the so-called stone fort is nothing more than leftover debris or half-finished cuts from those days. That would explain Some of the clean breaks and odd placements, but not all of it. Some of the rocks are far away from the main quarry area. Some are arranged in ways that don't fit any industrial pattern, and many are so worn and covered in moss that they clearly predate the modern quarry. That's where the debate kicks in. Is it a natural formation that just looks intentional? A case of pareidolia, the human brain trying to find patterns in chaos. Or is it something older, something deliberately constructed, now forgotten? More fringe theories have taken it even further. Some claim the site is evidence of ancient visitors, the kind that sailed across oceans before Columbus and left mysterious marks all over the Americas. Phoenicians, Celts, even survivors from Atlantis have all been suggested in hushed conversations and internet forums. It's a big leap, but the mystery of the stone fort seems to attract those kinds of ideas. Most visitors to Elephant Rocks never even notice it. They stay on the main path, take their photos, and head back to the parking lot. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. The park is beautiful, and the giant boulders are worth the trip on their own. But for those who take the time to climb the ridge, to step off the trail and really look, there's something eerie up there, something unspoken. You can feel it in the silence between the stones, in the way the light filters through the trees, in the deliberate balance of rock and earth. The site doesn't feel random, it feels chosen. And maybe that's the most haunting part, not knowing who stood here before us. Not knowing what they saw, what they believed, or what they built. The stone fort at Elephant Rocks remains one of Missouri's quietest mysteries, not because it's hidden, but because it's ignored. In the end, the unanswered questions might be the most powerful part of the story. This place isn't marked on any treasure map. It won't show up in your average guidebook, but it's there waiting, watching, slowly being reclaimed by time. If you ever visit, step off the main trail, climb to the top of the ridge, and when you reach the stone fort, don't expect answers. Just listen, look around, let the silence speak. Because sometimes the past doesn't leave words, it leaves stones. And the strange feeling that something important happened here long ago, even if we don't know what it was. The Osage River Relics, winding its way through the heart of Missouri. The Osage River doesn't just cut through the land, it cuts through time. Stretching from the highlands in the west to where it meets the Missouri River near Jefferson City. This river has been many things to many people over the centuries. A path, a boundary, a source of life, and maybe a keeper of secrets. This region, especially along the river's middle and lower banks, has turned up more than just fish and river rock. It's where locals and explorers have found odd relics, stone tools, carved figurines, burial mounds, and ceremonial items that don't always fit neatly into what we know about Missouri's past. Some of it looks like typical Native American artifacts, but a lot of it doesn't. The Osage Nation lived in this area for generations. Their name is stamped all over the map from Osage County to Osage Beach. Their influence is deeply rooted in Missouri's identity. But here's the strange part. Not all the relics found near the Osage River match what we know about Osage culture. Some pieces are older, much older, and others hint at traditions and symbolism that even tribal historians struggle to explain. The earliest reports of unusual finds go back to the 1800s. Settlers, farmers, and hunters working the land near the river would stumble across more than just arrowheads. Sure, they found those too, but now and then, someone would dig up something unexpected. A massive stone blade that looked too ceremonial to actually use, a chunk of pottery shaped like a face with exaggerated features, or flat stones covered in strange markings no one could identify. In places like Miller, Cole, and Osage counties, people reported burial mounds close to the riverbanks. Many of these were small, simple mounds, but some were more elaborate. Layers of ash and soil, chambers lined with stones, artifacts buried with the dead. Some contained pipes, tools, and ornaments, hinting at ritual practices. Sadly, a lot of these mounds were destroyed by farming, flooding, or construction before they could be studied properly. And when they were studied in the early 1900s, the records were often spotty at best. Many items disappeared into private collections or ended up in local museums with no real documentation. What's particularly intriguing is how these artifacts seem to represent a mix of cultures. Some matched the design styles of the Hopewell or Mississippian traditions to major prehistoric cultures that built earthworks, traded over long distances, and left behind large ceremonial sites across the Midwest. These groups thrived long before the Osage settled in Missouri. So, were these artifacts leftovers from those civilizations, or were smaller, lesser-known groups living along the Osage River between those big cultural eras? Nobody really knows, and that's where the mystery deepens. One of the more persistent legends is that of the Stone Man of the Supposedly in the late 1800s, someone discovered a carved humanoid figure along a bluff near the river. Some described it as a warrior. Others said it had animal features, maybe like a mask or hybrid being. There are no photos of it, just a few blurry newspaper clippings and scattered retellings. And the statue itself gone, whether it was lost, stolen, or destroyed. No one's sure, but the story lives on. Some think it was a tribal deity or guardian spirit. Others believe it points to contact with even older civilizations or cultures we've never identified. Then there are the so-called Osage tablets. These were flat stones found near river terraces in the 1920s and 30s, carved with deep, deliberate looking patterns. Some researchers believed they were ceremonial in nature, maybe even part of a lost writing system. Others were more skeptical, calling them natural erosion patterns or even modern forgeries. Like so many mysteries from the past, we're left with a mix of facts, guesses, and just enough evidence to keep the question alive, but not enough to answer it. One major problem is that much of the physical evidence is now gone. Over the decades, erosion, farming, road work, and rising waters have taken their toll. In some areas, whole cliff faces have collapsed into the river. Artifacts once buried safely in the soil have been washed away or destroyed. And while some relics still exist in personal collections or small museums, they often lack context. No notes, no site data, no way to connect them to the bigger picture. That makes it tough for modern archaeologists. Without clear records or reliable excavation data, it's hard to say what culture a piece belonged to, how old it is, or what it might have meant. In other words, we're working with a puzzle missing most of its pieces. Still, enough remains to hint at something deeper. There's a quiet richness to the Osage River region, a sense that under the topsoil and river silt, there's more than we've seen. The Missouri Department of Natural Resources has done some limited surveying, and local historical societies have tried to track down and preserve what they can, but large-scale archaeological work is rare, and much of the region's ancient past remains untouched. That might be changing. In recent years, the Osage Nation has renewed efforts to reclaim and protect its ancestral lands. Tribal historians and researchers are taking a closer look at sites that were previously overlooked or forgotten. And with better technology, things like ground-penetrating radar and 3D mapping, there's a growing hope that we might be able to locate undisturbed sites before they're lost forever. It's also worth remembering how close we came to knowing more. If just a few more mounds had been preserved, if more artifacts had been properly cataloged, if fewer were removed and scattered before experts could study them, we might have a much clearer understanding of the cultures that lived and thrived along the Osage River. Instead, we have fragments beautifully made but disconnected from their original stories. A carved stone pipe, a decorated piece of pottery, a tablet with patterns no one can read. Each one a whisper from a past we haven't fully pieced together. And yet the river flows on, calm, winding, ancient. After a heavy rain or a long drought, the water pulls back just enough to reveal a new clue. A washed-out bank, a newly exposed layer of earth. Maybe even a long-forgotten artifact catching the light for the first time in centuries. That's part of what makes the Osage River so fascinating. It's not just a place on a map. It's a living link to people we barely remember whose lives were shaped by the same hills, forests, and water we see today. The relics left behind aren't just curiosities. They're traces of belief systems, traditions, and identities that still echo through the land. And while we may never have all the answers, the mystery itself keeps the past alive. It challenges us to keep asking questions, to keep searching, and to look a little closer at the world around us, because sometimes the stories we're missing are buried just beneath the surface, waiting for someone to listen. The lost tribe of the Ozarks dot deep in the Ozark Mountains of southern Missouri. There's a legend that refuses to fade. It's not the kind of story you'll find in textbooks or on museum plaques. It lives in quiet conversations, in old family stories, passed down at kitchen tables, and in the silence of the forest where moss creeps up stone walls and forgotten trails vanish into undergrowth. Locals call it the story of the lost tribe of the Ozarks. It's an old tale, and like most legends, it comes with plenty of versions. But the heart of the mystery is this: long before European settlers arrived, and maybe even before the Osage and other well-known tribes lived in the area, there may have been a separate group of people, a tribe that didn't quite fit with the rest. They lived in the shadows of the mountains, tucked away in steep hollows and deep river valleys in places that still feel remote today. And then, for reasons no one can explain, they disappeared. Who were they? That's the question that keeps coming up. And honestly, no one has a solid answer. Most of the sightings and rumors come from the counties of Shannon, Oregon, and Douglas. If you've ever driven the winding roads down there, you'll know how easy it is to get lost in those hills. Even today, with GPS and satellite maps, there are places that feel untouched where a person could live their whole life and never see more than a few neighbors. Back in the 1800s, when European American settlers were pushing westward and cutting their way into the wilderness, some of them started reporting odd things. They'd find ruins, not full buildings, but stone walls tucked into the sides of ridges, rock shelters that looked like someone had once lived there, and tools that didn't quite match the ones they'd seen from local tribes. Burial sites turned up too, with items that had unfamiliar patterns, carvings, and pottery that just didn't fit into the neat categories that archaeologists would later create for woodland or Mississippian cultures. Then came the stories, the ones that don't show up in official histories, but always seem to find their way into conversation when the fire burns low and the night gets quiet. Some Ozark families claimed their grandparents or great-grandparents had encountered people in the hills who didn't belong to any known tribe. These weren't just drifters or loners. They were described as light-skinned, dark-haired, and wary of outsiders. They kept to themselves, lived in small, close-knit groups, and spoke in a dialect no one could place. According to some stories, they had different customs, different beliefs. They held strange rituals. They carved unfamiliar symbols into stone, and just as suddenly as they were noticed, they were gone. Some said they moved deeper into the mountains. Others believe they simply died out. Their way of life too fragile to survive the changes that swept through the region. But there's more. Early trappers and explorers left behind notes about abandoned stone villages. Not the typical wood and hide structures used by most tribes in the area, but something else. Something more permanent. In a few caves, there were strange glyphs etched into the walls, not quite like anything documented in the wider Mississippi Valley cultures. And if you talk to certain old-timers, they'll tell you about ridge-top graves with long, narrow skulls or skeletons said to have unusually long limbs. Of course, a lot of these claims come with a healthy dose of skepticism. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, it wasn't uncommon for newspapers to run with wild archaeological claims, ancient giants, mysterious mummies, the occasional lost white tribe. Some of that was just part of the era, a time when archaeology and folklore were often tangled up together. And a good story sold more papers than a dull fact. And unfortunately, many of the artifacts mentioned back then are now gone, either taken by private collectors, lost in poorly documented local museums, or simply never verified in the first place. Still, that didn't stop people from trying to figure it out. A few amateur historians started calling them the Lost Tribe of the Ozarks, and the name stuck. Theories started piling up. One suggested they were descendants of early Europeans, maybe shipwrecked Spaniards or Welsh sailors who wandered inland and blended with native cultures. Another theory, less grounded in evidence, tried to link them to the so-called 10 lost tribes of Israel. That one gained some traction among fringe writers in the early 20th century, but never made it far in academic circles. The more practical theory is also, in some ways, the most haunting. It's possible that the Lost Tribe wasn't foreign at all, just an isolated group of early Native Americans predating the Mississippian influence who developed their own unique customs, tools, and art in near total isolation. Missouri, after all, is packed with archaeological sites that haven't been fully explored. There are caves and mounds and ridges with secrets that still haven't been uncovered. In a place as vast and rugged as the Ozarks, it's not hard to imagine a small group surviving off the land for generations, slowly fading into memory without leaving much behind. Even the Osage, whose oral traditions go back centuries, told stories of earlier inhabitants, but as mysterious forest dwellers who retreated deeper into the woods whenever strangers came near. Some researchers think those myths might contain kernels of real history remembered and passed down in symbolic form. Throughout the 20th century, a handful of independent researchers kept digging. Sometimes, literally, caves in the southern part of the state continued to yield human remains, often with stone tools or carvings that didn't match known styles. But without proper documentation and funding, most of these finds stayed stuck in limbo. Interesting, but not conclusive. Today, the legend sits in a strange place. There's no solid evidence, no confirmed cultural artifacts tied to a single lost group, but the stories haven't gone away. In places like Eminence, Mountain View, and West Plains, you'll still hear people talk about rock walls they found on their land or old symbols carved into the side of a bluff. Hikers stumble across them, take pictures, and wonder. Sometimes, a new theory pops up online connecting dots that may or may not be related. Half folklore, half amateur archaeology, and maybe that's the most fascinating thing about it. Not whether the Lost Tribe of the Ozarks really existed, but how much we still don't know about the land beneath our feet. The Ozarks are a maze of shadowed valleys and silent hills. You can walk for miles without seeing a soul. There are caves no one's ever mapped, cliffs that haven't been studied, and river bends where time seems to slow down. If something or someone wanted to disappear here, they probably could. Whether the story is real or imagined, it's become part of the identity of this place. It taps into something deep and old. The feeling that history isn't always obvious, that sometimes what matters most is what's been forgotten. It reminds us that not every mystery is meant to be solved. Some are meant to be felt, to be wondered about. And next time you're hiking through a cedar thicket or following a stream through a narrow glade, take a look around. Listen. You might not find stone, walls, or ancient carvings, but you might feel the story still whispering through the trees. Underground tunnels beneath St. Louis. Underneath the city of St. Louis, there's a hidden world, a network of old tunnels, sealed off passageways, and forgotten chambers that most people walk over every day without realizing what's beneath them. On the surface, St. Louis is a city of stadiums, breweries, and brick buildings. But go just a little deeper and you enter a very different place, one filled with history, mystery, and a whole lot of unanswered questions. Now, some of what's under St. Louis is well known. There are 19th century beer cellars, old steam tunnels from the industrial age, and modern sewer lines. But over the years, people have stumbled across parts of the underground that don't appear on any official map. These sections raise a strange question. What else is buried beneath this city and who put it there? To understand the mystery, you have to go back to the beginning. St. Louis was founded in 1764 by French fur traders, and thanks to its position along the Mississippi River, it quickly grew into a transportation and manufacturing powerhouse. As the city expanded, it built much of its early infrastructure underground, including storage vaults, coal tunnels, sewer systems, and even secret railways. But here's where things get odd. People have been reporting tunnels that don't match any of those known systems for more than 150 years. Take the Sollard and Lafayette Square neighborhoods, for example. These areas are famous for their 1800s-era breweries, especially the massive Anheuser-Busch and LMP operations. Back then, beer had to be stored in cool places, so breweries carved lagering caves into the soft limestone beneath the city. These caves are real. Some are still accessible, but others lead somewhere else entirely. Urban explorers, the kind of people who sneak into abandoned buildings and forgotten basements, have reported tunnels branching off from these beer caves. Some end in collapsed stairways or bricked-off walls. Others just keep going. There are tales of old stone corridors that vanish into darkness, staircases that lead to nowhere, and doorways carved right into the bedrock, all sitting quietly beneath everyday city blocks. The Lump Brewery especially draws attention. The Lump family, one of St. Louis's wealthiest beer dynasties, built their operations above a cave system in South City. It's said that their tunnels once connected to Bellefontaine Cemetery and stretched toward Cherokee Street. These rumors are impossible to fully confirm, but they've stuck around for a reason. Some even say the tunnels were used for illegal activity, secret gatherings, or hiding scandalous family matters. Considering the Lampump Mansion's reputation as one of the most haunted places in America, the idea of dark secrets buried underground doesn't seem far off. But not all of the mystery tunnels are tied to beer. Some might be much, much older. Long before St. Louis was a French outpost or an industrial city, it was part of a vast Native American civilization. The Mississippian culture, known for building massive earthen mounds, once filled this area. In fact, St. Louis was nicknamed Mound City because it had so many of them. Most of these mounds were destroyed in the 1800s to make way for streets and buildings. But some people believe that what lay beneath them was never fully uncovered, or maybe never understood at all. There are accounts, mostly from the 19th century, of workers digging foundations for new buildings and stumbling onto stone vaults, burial sites, or strange artifacts. Some described walls built of uncut stone arranged with no clear industrial function. Others found bones or tools that didn't seem to match any known group. The problem is documentation was poor, and most of what was found back then disappeared into private hands or was buried again in the rush of construction. Still, stories persist. Some researchers and amateur historians think that parts of the mound building culture may have extended underground ceremonial chambers, perhaps, or crypts built into the limestone. There's no hard proof, but the theory remains on the table, especially since so many ancient structures have already been erased above ground. And that brings us to modern times. Today, the most active voices keeping the legend alive are urban explorers. They post photos and stories online showing what they've found. Old brick archways hidden behind crumbling walls, massive rooms with no known entrance, and tunnels that appear to serve no modern purpose. Some are narrow, others big enough to walk through. Many aren't marked on city maps at all. One popular theory is that these are remnants of forgotten rail spurs or utility lines. And in some cases, that's probably true, but in other cases, the age and style of the construction just don't line up. You'll see arched ceilings made of stone, dry-laid walls with no mortar, or corridors that curve for no reason. Some seem to go nowhere, unless, of course, you keep digging. Then there are the wilder stories, the ones about sealed vaults filled with Civil War weapons or secret chambers used by Freemasons or other fraternal orders. In the late 1800s, groups like that were very active in St. Louis, and some were known to meet in basements or behind closed doors. Whether they actually had their own tunnels is anyone's guess, but the idea adds another layer of mystery to the underground. City officials don't say much about all this, which is understandable. A lot of the tunnels are unsafe, prone to collapse, full of toxic air, or structurally unstable. There's also the legal issue. If people start sneaking around down there, someone's going to get hurt. So, most of the forgotten spaces stay locked up, mapped only by a few researchers or the occasional city maintenance crew who accidentally breaks into something unexpected. And that still happens. Every once in a while, someone digging a new foundation or repairing an old basement finds something strange. A stone staircase, a bricked-up doorway, or a passage that leads into pitch-black space. Sometimes it's just old infrastructure. Other times, it leads to more questions than answers. So, is there really a hidden city beneath St. Louis? The answer is yes, in part. The beer caves, steam tunnels, and forgotten basements are very real. They're part of the city's history, but whether there's something older, stranger, or entirely unrecorded down there, that's still up for debate. What makes the mystery so compelling is how easily it could be true. St. Louis is a city built on centuries of change. Cultures have risen and fallen here, and most left little behind. The idea that something was buried and forgotten intentionally or not feels entirely possible, and until someone maps every inch of what lies beneath, the legend of the underground tunnels will keep going. Because sometimes the most interesting part of a city isn't what's built on top of the ground, it's what's still hidden underneath it.